Hi everybody, Kacyn here. Okay, so for this video I wanted to do my previous birth stories for my 3 boys. I've had a few people ask me about them, and I figured it's just easier to do a video about it. So my first son, Jaxon, I actually got pregnant with when I was in high school. It was about 3 months before, actually about 2 months before I graduated high school when I got pregnant with him. So I was young, to say the least. But ultimately, as hard as it was being a high school pregnant mom, it changed my life for the better. He definitely made me grow up into the mom I am and the person I am, and if I did not get pregnant with him as early as I did, I really don't know where my life would have been at this point. Probably somewhere not good, and I probably wouldn't be in the place I am now. So I got pregnant with him very early in my life, and the pregnancy was very easy. It was not a rough pregnancy. Everything was really good. I didn't have like any morning sickness. It was just an overall easy pregnancy. I felt great the entire time. I never got, put on bed rest. I never had preterm labor, or not preterm labor, sorry, Braxton Hicks contractions. I never had any of those the entire pregnancy. It was a very easy pregnancy. I went into my 36-week appointment thinking everything was fine and dandy. I felt great. The hospital I delivered at with Jaxon was about 10 to 20 minutes away, probably closer to 20 minutes away from where we were living, and my appointments were up at the same place. And so we were up that way for my appointment, me and my mom, and I go into that appointment. They're doing all the normal, measuring the belly, checking the heartbeat. Everything was perfect. And we went into the ultrasound room to do a 36-week ultrasound to make sure he was growing right on schedule and all that good stuff. And he looked perfect. He looked great. He had great fluid. Nothing, not too much, not too little. It was just perfect. She did a cervix check, and I remember laying down and being super uncomfortable because it was the first time I've had that experience of having a cervix checked, and it was not fun. But she did my cervix check, and I can remember laying there looking at my doctor, and she looked at me with like this really weird look, like kind of like that, like as she's like up in there, and she looks at me and she goes, "Have you been having any pain?" I was like, "No, I have not had a single ounce of pain. I felt great. I've been doing good." And she's like, "Well, you're dilated to a 5. And I was like, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, I haven't had any contractions or any pain that I've noticed out of the ordinary." And she's like, "Okay, well, it could mean nothing. You could be coming back next week for your 37-week appointment, or it could mean that you're about to go into labor. And so go schedule your next appointment, and we'll see if you make it that far." So I scheduled my next appointment for the following week, and after we were done, my grandma lives up by the hospital I was at, or the doctor's office I was at for my appointment, and so we went over to my grandma's house. My brother happened to be there because his car or something was getting fixed, so he was just staying there. And we're like, "Well, let's go out and get some lunch." And so we did that, and we ended up going to this little store afterwards to just look around. And while we were there, I was like, "Mom, I'm getting super crampy, like I'm starting to hurt." And so we went back to my grandma's house, and we were sitting there, and I was just very crampy. I was sitting on the couch, and I can remember thinking, I'm not feeling good. It was really weird. It was really weird. And my grandma's dog, who never usually comes to me ever, was like sitting on my lap with his head on my belly, just sitting there, wouldn't move. He was wouldn't let anyone get close to me. And I was like, well, maybe we should. This was a few hours after my appointment. This was that night, whereas my appointment was in the morning. So it didn't happen fast. It was spread out throughout the day. And I went in there. I was like, Mom, I think we should go to the hospital and just have me checked before we drive the 20 minutes home and then have to come right back for something. If it were to happen, I'd rather go get checked while we're here. So we went over to the hospital, got checked in, sat in the waiting room for like half an hour waiting for a room. We finally get back to a room, and the nurse comes in and checks me, and I was at a 6.5 centimeters dilated. So I was making progress. I was in labor, didn't even know it. And my doctor came in, and she broke my water. It's like, yeah, it's time to have a baby. I'm not going to send you home when you came in this morning at a 5 and you're at a 6.5, almost a 7. And so she broke my water. I got an epidural because I was young and a baby with pain. And so I got that done, and 3 hours after she broke my water, my son came into the world. His name is Jaxon James, and he was born on November 21st, 2007 at 1:43 in the morning. And he weighed 5 pounds, 10 ounces, and 18 inches long. Yeah, and 18 inches long. He was beautiful. He had just this like cute little like peach fuzz hair. And he just cried and cried and cried. They weren't sure how developed his lungs were going to be. They had the NICU team on standby. But he was great. He just kept crying and crying, and his lungs just were opening up, and he just turned pink as pink can be, and he was beautiful. I mean, he came into this world and he changed mine. He changed my world. I mean, he was my baby. He was my baby. And I can never say enough things about my son. I mean, he had the greatest, most sweet, kind-hearted spirit and heart. And he was this perfect little angel baby. And my life was finally where I needed it to be. And he's always going to have probably the most special place in my heart, being as he did change my life for who I am today. Not that my other kids haven't, they have too, but there was something just about this baby that was literally a miracle. He was a miracle. Whether he came early at a young age in my life or later, he's my miracle. So it was a very quick labor and a very good pregnancy, and not a lot of details for him. So yeah, so that's Jackson's birth story. My next son, Kacyn, his birth story is pretty much the same. I had a rougher pregnancy with him. He was a planned pregnancy. We did plan for him, and I got pregnant with him, I think 3 or 4 months after starting to try for a baby. And his pregnancy was rough. Had a lot of kidney stones and dehydration problems with him. And right before I was 36 weeks with him, and I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was very sick. I woke up, I was up all night the previous night, just throwing up, sick as can be. I was puking nonstop. I couldn't keep any food or anything to drink down. Even just the tiniest sip of water would make me throw up. I was severely dehydrated. I was just miserable all night long. And it continued through the next day. And me, I started having a lot of cramps, and I figured it was probably just my muscles in my stomach from throwing up so much. Definitely figured it was from that, nothing more. And my husband was working late that night, and my brother and my sister-in-law came and took Jaxon just in case I needed to go to the hospital. So they took him for the night for me, while I could just kind of relax and hopefully try and feel better. My aunt even came over to sit with me since my husband was at work and couldn't get off right then, and so she came and sat with me. I was cramping, but it was nothing I could time. It wasn't contractions. It was just really bad, like, period cramps constantly. And she didn't think I needed to go, otherwise she would have took me for sure. But she just advised me, why don't we just try and get you comfortable and like on the couch, and and settle you down. So I laid down. I remember laying there and kind of falling asleep, and my aunt was sitting there with me, and my husband ended up getting home a couple hours after this, and my aunt left, and I was talking to him and told him what was going on, and I was like, I even if it's not labor, I feel like I need to go get some fluids, like an IV, because I know I'm severely dehydrated. I haven't been able to eat or drink anything in over 24 hours. And so he ended up taking me in, and they got me up to a room right away. Got me hooked up to all the monitors, and the baby, he looked perfect. His heart was great. They checked my cervix. I was dilated to a 5, and having contractions every 2 to 3 minutes on the spot. I didn't feel them, but I was having them. And so they decided to just keep me there. My doctor broke my water. I didn't get an epidural right away. I waited probably about an hour or so, and then I decided to get one. Just because I was feeling so miserable, I didn't know if I could even attempt to try for a natural birth. Excuse me. And yeah, so I got my epidural, and his labor was really quick as well. He came literally just sliding into the world by himself. I remember them checking my cervix and being like, wow, you are at, I went from an 8 and a -1 station to fully dilated and a +3 station within about 20 minutes. And I mean, he was literally coming out on his own. So my husband popped out the video camera, and the nurses and the doctor came running in. They got everything set up, and he was out within 3 minutes after that point. So he came out really fast, and he was beautiful too. He had blonde hair. He had quite a bit of it. Not too much, but more than my first son Jaxon did. He had his little long chicky fuzz, and it was blonde. He did have to go to the NICU for a few hours to get some oxygen after he was born. So I didn't see him for a few hours after I had him. And he was beautiful too. And I remember being taken to the postpartum room, and then bringing him to me 3 hours later and holding him for the first time. And my heart melted. I mean, this baby was beautiful. He was born on March 13th, 2011. His name is Kacyn Gregery. He was 6 pounds even and 19.5 inches long. and he was just beautiful. I remember my son Jaxon coming to meet him for the first time in the hospital, and I remember just having a smile ear to ear when my boys got to meet for the first time. It was a heart-melting experience for a mom. So that's Kacyn's birth story. So my third son, Koen, he was not a planned pregnancy. I got pregnant with him 5 months after I had Kacyn, and he was a rough pregnancy too, and I think it had a lot to do with me not being fully recovered from Kacyn's birth. He was a very hard pregnancy, and I remember his labor like it was yesterday too. I was 35 and a half weeks pregnant with him, and I went to bed the night before I had him, and I woke up and I was extremely crampy, really crampy, and I woke my husband up. It was early, and I was like, hey, I'm extremely crampy. I don't know if I'm in labor or if I'm just uncomfortable or slept weird, but I'm really crampy. And I said, I want you to take me to the doctor's. This was like 8 o'clock in the morning. And he took me in. He called his parents, and they came to watch our other 2 boys while we went in. And I got there, got checked in, got hooked up. I wasn't contracting, but my uterus was very irritable. And a few days prior to this, I had gone into the doctor's office for a lot of pressure. And I was 3 centimeters dilated at this appointment when I went in to talk to him. And he did an ultrasound, and we found that Koen had a ton of extra fluid around him, like way more than the average amount. So my belly size contributed to just a lot of extra fluid, not necessarily him. He was very small. But so he just told me, watch, because I don't want you having your water broken at home. He was very worried that with the amount of extra fluid I had, that if my water were to break, the cord would easily get swooped up under Koen, and he could very easily die. So when I was having the cramps and not contractions, but the cramps that morning, I was like, I need to go in, because if I am in starting labor, I don't want my water breaking while I am at home. And we went in there, and he checked my cervix when I got there, and I was at a 5. Of course, it's all my birth stories are pretty much the same. I always start out at a 5 when I go in. And like I said, the monitors were showing irritability, not contractions. It's like, well, let's watch it for a few hours, and if you start contracting or if your cervix is changing, then we'll keep you here. So after a few hours, he checked my cervix again, and I was only at like a 5.5. So I didn't make a lot of progress, but where I did change, he did want to keep me. So when I got there, the baby was head down, and I remember when he checked me that second time when I was 5.5, he's like, I can't feel the baby's head anymore. And I think he's flipped. And I remember like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a C-section and whatnot. And so they pulled in the ultrasound machine and found out that he flipped sideways. And so the doctor's like, I'm gonna have to turn him head down. My bag of water was still intact, so he couldn't like get up there to help turn him. I just remember the pain being horrible when they had to push on my stomach to get him to flip. I've never had so much pain from pressing on my stomach before. I mean, I literally felt like he was grabbing the sides of my stomach and trying to rip it off. But after about 10 minutes of them giving me excruciating pain, he finally got him to turn back to head down. And that's when they decided to break my water while he was head down so he didn't flip. So they got him to turn head down, and they broke my water, and it was like a river of flowing water that flowed forever. I remember just constantly gushing out water through the rest of my labor because there was so much of it. I mean, they broke it, and it was all over the bed, all over the floor, everywhere. And every time I contract, more would just gush out. So I had tons and tons of water with Koen. And I ended up getting an epidural with him. I don't remember why I chose to get an epidural, but I did. I've already had 2 before, and I did. I just decided to have one. And they came and put it in. They had to redo it twice for some god-awful reason. The thing, after they did it the first time, slipped out, and they had to re-put it back in. So I had to have my epidural done twice, and after I got the epidural, my labor progressed pretty quickly. I got stalled at a 7 for a few hours, and they turned me onto my left side, and once they turned me onto my left side, in about half an hour to an hour, I would say, I went from a 7 to a 10. And so they came in, got everything set up, and I pushed him out in like 30 seconds. He was very, very small. I just remember seeing how small he was and just freaking out. They had the NICU team in there evaluating him, and he was beautiful. He came out with like this gorgeous full head of dark brown hair. But he was just so small. He had no fat on him. He just looked like bones. He was teeny tiny. He was born April 4th, 2012 at 4:17 p.m. He was 5 pounds, 5 ounces, and 19 inches long, which is not the correct measurement. He was actually under 18 inches when I took him to the doctors. But anyway, I got to hold him for a few minutes, and then they saw that he wasn't breathing well, and they rushed him to the NICU. And I remember being in the postpartum, or just still in the recovery room, and my husband had to go home to see what was wrong with our other kids, and so I was sitting there alone, and they took me to the postpartum room after about an hour sitting in recovery, and they wheeled me through the NICU, and I go through the NICU, and he's hooked up to an IV, these heart monitors, an oxygen monitor, oxygen. I mean, he was covered in wires, and I can remember thinking, what's gonna happen to my baby? My baby wasn't coming to my room. And so I got taken to my room. I only got to see him for a second as they wheeled me past, and I got put into a room, and I was stuck there because I had an epidural. I couldn't get up out of bed. I was stuck there for hours by myself, wondering what's going on with my baby. When my epidural finally wore off later that night, I was finally able to go down and see him. He was this beautiful, beautiful little boy, and he was hooked up to all these monitors and things that just made it look so scary. And getting in there and not being able to hold him was devastating. And I didn't get to hold him until the following day when he finally came off oxygen. And holding him for the first time, hooked up to all these wires, it was happy and it was scary. And it was very, very hard to see your baby struggle and not be able to do anything about it. A couple days later went by and I had to leave the hospital without him. And I can remember saying goodbye when I went home and just crying in the car. I just was bawling. I was excited to see my other kids, but it was very hard to leave the one I carried around for so long, to just leave him without his mom. He ended up being in the NICU for 5 days, and then he finally got to come home, and my life was complete. I had my 3 boys. Life was hard. Kacyn and Koen are only 12 months apart, and it was very hard to get used to having 3, especially 2 that were so close when Kacyn was still a baby himself. But I adjusted, and life is great, and my 3 boys are all extremely healthy and happy, and it's exciting to see my boys grow and become the cute little boys that they are. And I am so excited to have this little girl that's going to be coming here in a couple months, and to have my 4 kids grow up together and us just enjoy being a family. And there is nothing better than being a mom. Being a mom is the best life choice I could have ever made for myself. All my kids have been these little miracles, and all of them have taught me something new about being a mom and being a good person. They all have something to teach. Every little baby has something to teach, and there's nothing more exciting and humbling than having kids. As stressful as it is, it's the best. So anyway, I apologize that this video was so long, but I really wanted to explain my birth story. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about any of these 3 stories, let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.